Okay, so if you wanted to conquer a country and you needed to do it quickly, what's the very first thing you'd have to do?
You'd need to get control,
Oh,
physical control, and you'd have to do it fast.
that's the exact problem the Normans faced in England right after 1066. They suddenly had all this land, but constant resistance.
Exactly. They needed defenses up yesterday,
Yeah.
and they needed everyone to see who was in charge now.
And that brings us to our deep dive today, the medieval castle. We're going to trace how they went from basically a giant dirt mound.
All the way to those massive stone fortresses that you still see all over Europe. It's really a story of how military problems drive incredible engineering.
So let's start at the beginning. The first design the Normans brought over, the Motte and Bailey Castle.
Right. And the most important thing to understand about them is speed. They could throw one of these up in just a few weeks.
A few weeks.
Yeah, because they just used what was right there. Earth and timber. No need to quarry stone or wait for special materials.
So it's almost like a medieval flat pack fortress.
Let's break it down. What exactly is a malt and what's a bailey?
Okay, so the motte is the main feature. It's a huge man-made hill.
Man-made, so they literally just piled up dirt.
Literally, they dig a massive ditch and just pile all that earth into a mound. Sometimes, I mean, these things could be 50, 60, even 80 feet high.
That sounds like an unbelievable amount of work.
Oh, it was. Just thousands of hours of back-breaking labor. But here's the really clever part, and it's not just about engineering.
It's political.
It's absolutely political. The Normans would force the local English population to do the digging. Imagine being forced to build a fortress for your new conquerors. It was a powerful psychological statement right from day one.
Wow. Okay, so you've got this giant mound of dirt. What goes on top?
That's where you put the keep, or sometimes it was called the donjon.
A wooden tower?
Exactly. A wooden tower that served as the Lord's home, the main lookout post, and, the final place to run if things went really bad. From up there, archers could see for miles. And I read they had this really simple, low-tech way of defending the slope of the moat itself.
Yeah, it was brilliant. They'd just cover the sides with wet clay. So if you're an attacker, you're trying to scramble up a steep, slippery, muddy hill while people are shooting arrows down at you.
Not gonna work.
Not likely.
So that's the moat. What about the baileys down at the bottom?
The bailey was the large courtyard at the base. This is where daily life actually happened. It was like a little fortified village.
So it was all enclosed.
Oh, yeah. You'd have a deep ditch, maybe even a moat, and then a high wooden fence called a palisade all the way around it.
And inside you'd find everything.
Pretty much. Stables, kitchens, barracks for the soldiers, a blacksmith's forge. It would have been crowded, noisy, probably very smelly.
A real sensory experience.
For sure. And if an attack came, everyone and everything of value, all the people, the livestock would flee from the bailey, up the moat, and into that wooden keep for safety.
It sounds super efficient for a temporary fix, but a fortress made of wood that just screams vulnerable.
It had huge flaws. Fatal flaws, really. First, fire. One flaming arrow and your whole castle could go up in smoke.
Right.
Second, rot. You're in Northern Europe, it's damp. Those wooden posts would just rot away in a couple of decades. And third, they just weren't strong enough against bigger siege weapons.
So a temporary castle sends a message of temporary power. To show you were there to stay, you had to build in stone.
Exactly. Stone was the game changer. It doesn't burn, it doesn't rot, and it can stand up to a lot more punishment. But it created a whole new set of problems.
Like cost, I'm guessing.
Massive costs.
Yeah.
And time. You couldn't use local peasant labor for this. You needed skilled professionals, stonemasons who knew how to cut and fit these huge blocks. A big stone castle could take 10, even 20 years to build.
And you can't put a 20-year project that weighs thousands of tons on top of a pile of loose dirt.
That was the biggest engineering hurdle. The motte was useless for a stone keep. You had to build on solid ground, on bedrock if you could find it. So the whole design shifts to this single, massive, incredibly thick stone building.
The stone keep. Those iconic square towers. You mentioned thick walls, sometimes 10 feet thick or more. Why so thick? Was that just for show?
No, not at all. That thickness served two critical defensive purposes. The first is obvious, to stop boulders from siege engines like trebuchets.
And the second?
The second was to stop mining. This was a terrifying tactic where attackers would actually dig a tunnel under your wall.
Right, to collapse it.
Exactly. But if your wall is 10 feet thick at the base, it's incredibly difficult for them to dig far enough under to do any real damage before their own tunnel collapses on them.
So the outside is a fortress. How did they make the air side just as hard to conquer? I'm thinking about the entrance.
The entrance was key. You never, ever had a door on the ground floor. The main entrance was always on the first floor, maybe 15 or 20 feet up,
And you got up there how?
usually with a wooden staircase that could be easily destroyed or pulled up. If the enemy gets to the base of your tower, you just chop away their only way in.
And below that, on the ground floor.
That was basically the basement. Storage. It was filled with barrels of food, water, weapons, everything you'd need to survive a long siege. And crucially, that's where you'd find well, dug deep into the ground to give you a protected water source.
And the staircases inside are famous for being incredibly narrow.
Not just narrow, but they almost always spiral upwards in a clockwise direction.
I've always heard that. Why is that?
It's a deliberate defensive design. If you're a right-handed defender coming down the stairs, your forward arm has a full range of motion. But for a right-handed attacker coming up the stairs?
Your sword arm is jammed against the central pillar.
Precisely. It gives the defender a small but significant advantage in a fight. Every detail was about defense.
So once you get past all those traps, you get to the upper levels, the heart of the castle, the Great Hall.
The Great Hall was the center of everything. It was the dining room, the courtroom, and often where most of the soldiers slept. It would have these huge fireplaces because without them, these stone rooms were just incredibly cold and damp.
Where did the Lord and his family get any privacy?
They went up to the solars. These were the private family rooms on the top floors. A bit more comfortable, a bit warmer, and away from the noise and chaos of the Great Hall.
And they used tapestries on the walls, which we think of as decoration, but they had a real purpose.
A vital purpose. They provided a layer of insulation. They helped trap heat from the fire, and just as importantly, they stopped so much dampness from seeping through the cold stone. It was a safer life for sure, but definitely not a cozy one.
Okay, let's move back outside to what I call the clever tech. The specific architectural features designed to stop an attack before it even reached the keep.
You'd start at the very top of the walls with the crenellations. Those are the iconic square notches.
Up and down battlements.
Right. An archer could step into the gap to shoot and then immediately duck back behind the solid stone part for cover.
My favorite, though, has to be the maculations. That just sounds brutal.
They were. These were sections of the wall that jutted out of the top, and they had holes in the floor. So if attackers were right at the base of the wall trying to break it down,
you could just drop things straight down on their heads.
Rocks, boiling water, hot sand, anything. It was incredibly effective and terrifying.
And then there's the weakest point of any castle, the gate.
Which is why the gatehouse became its own mini fortress. And the main defense there was the portcullis.
The big iron grill.
Yep, a heavy iron or wood grill that could be dropped in an instant to seal the entrance. It could even trap attackers inside the gate passage.
And what about those tiny slits you see in the walls? They look impossible to shoot from.
The arrow loops. They're a brilliant piece of design. From the outside, they're just a tiny, narrow slit, making it almost impossible for an enemy arrow to get in.
But on the inside?
On the inside, the wall is cut away so the slit flares out widely. It gives your archer a really wide field of fire while keeping them almost completely protected.
Now, all this amazing tech is useless without people to operate it. Let's talk about the castle garrison.
The garrison was the permanent military force living in the castle. The knights, archers, men-at-arms, they were the constant visible symbol of the Lord's power in the area.
And their life was just training and guard duty.
Pretty much. Constant drills, weapons practice, and standing guard on the walls day and night. It was a full-time professional job.
And who was in charge if the Lord was away?
That was the constable. He was the officer commanding the castle. He was in charge of discipline, supplies, defenses. If the castle ever had to surrender, the constable was the one who made that call.
Which brings us to the ultimate test, the siege.
Right. A siege meant you surrounded the castle completely. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out, and you just wait.
For months, right, or even years.
It could be years. The goal was simply to starve them out.
And while you're waiting, you bring out the heavy machinery.
Oh, yeah. The king of siege weapons was the trebuchet, a massive counterweighted catapult that could hurl boulders weighing hundreds of pounds over huge distances.
Could that actually break a 10-foot thick wall?
Not with one hit. But if you keep hitting the same spot day after day for weeks, eventually the stone will crack and the wall will fail.
And then there's that other tactic you mentioned, mining.
Which was just as terrifying.
Yeah.
The attackers would dig a tunnel, prop up the roof with wooden beams once they were under the castle's foundation, and then
set it on fire.
They'd pack the end of the tunnel with flammable material, light it, and run. When the wooden supports burned away, the foundation above them would collapse, bringing a whole section of the wall crashing down.
So the defenders' main strategy was just to outlast the enemy.
Endurance was everything. They had to rely on the food and water they'd stockpiled. But here's the thing people forget. The attacking army also needed food and supplies.
And that's expensive.
Incredibly expensive. Often the attackers would run out of money or food before the defenders did, which is why the vast majority of successful sieges weren't won by breaking down a wall. They were won through starvation or disease inside the castle.
So these incredible fortresses, designed to last forever, eventually became obsolete. What happened?
It was a mix of things. First, architects realized those big square keeps had a weakness. The corners.
The corner.
Yeah, a square corner is a structural weak point. It's easier to damage with a trebuchet, and it's much easier to collapse with a mine.
So that led to a new design.
It led directly to round towers. A round tower deflects projectiles much better, and it has no weak corners to undermine. It was a huge leap forward in defensive design.
But even the strongest round tower couldn't withstand the final innovation.
Gunpowder. Once cannons became powerful and reliable, the whole game changed. A cannonball could do what a trebuchet could only do over weeks, but it could do it in a matter of days. Even the thickest stone walls were now vulnerable.
So the castle had to change its function entirely.
It did. It transitioned from being a military fortress into being a comfortable home for the nobility. New forts were built low to the ground to absorb cannon fire, not tower over the landscape. The age of the high medieval castle was over.
But their legacy is just immense.
Absolutely. Those ruins are monuments. They literally dictated where our modern towns and cities grew up. They're a physical record of that incredible arms race between engineering and destruction.
From a simple mound of dirt built for speed to a massive stone fortress designed for permanence, the story of the castle is one of constant, relentless adaptation.
And a reminder that even the strongest wall is only strong until the next big weapon comes along.
See you next time.